Mark Few and Team USA took down Kelly Olynyk, Andrew Nembhard, and Team Canada in a pre-Olympic scrimmage on Wednesday, but our former Zags showed plenty of promise.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Thursday. Happy 7-Eleven, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by FanDuel. Folks, make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to, but this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every single day. That's right. There's something for everybody every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Well, folks, it is an all Olympics episode here of Locked On Zags. We're going to break down the scrimmage game that we saw on Wednesday night between Team USA, where Mark Few is an assistant coach, and Team Canada, where Kelly Olynyk and Andrew Nembhard are both participating for the team. We're also going to talk about the Ejim family. They have two Olympians this year, including, of course, Gonzaga super senior forward Yvonne Ejim. We'll talk about that. We're going to close out the show talking about the other Olympians, Filip Petrusev and Hachimura, what their situation looks like as we get closer and closer to the actual 2024 Olympic Games. All right, we start with the scrimmage game. Wednesday night in Las Vegas, Team USA versus Team Canada, a first opportunity to see kind of both these clubs in action. We knew it would be a little messy. We knew it would be a little sloppy. We knew both rosters had not had a ton of time to prep together. A lot of team cohesion hadn't really happened. Lineups hadn't been all that established. Kevin Durant did not participate for Team USA. They did not have Derek White, who was just added to the roster to replace Kawhi Leonard, who was stepping away. So they were a little bit shorthanded. And what we ultimately ended up getting was what we thought, a fairly sloppy game of basketball between two teams that clearly have a lot of talent, but that have yet to put all of the pieces together in terms of how they want rotations to work. Steve Kerr had a starting lineup out there that got boat raced by Canada. I think it was 11-1 or 12-3, something like that in the early going. And then they brought in an entire new unit of reserves, which is still a better starting lineup than every other team in the Olympics has by far. Like, that is how deep this Team USA roster is that their backups and their backups are better than the majority of the rest of the rosters. Team Canada, and we'll talk about Kelly Olynyk and Andrew Nembhard, who both came off the bench in a second, have a quality 6, 7, 8-man rotation. But after that, the depth is just not there. It's just not there for Team Canada, and really for most of the teams in this tournament. It's just not going to be a situation where they're going to have the depth to keep up with the United States, who starts basically an all-NBA second-team caliber lineup in the second unit for this team. They're just that good. And the way that Anthony Davis and Bam Adebayo played in the front court in particular is going to make this team really, really good. Let's talk about the Zags. Kelly Olynyk and Andrew Nembhard both came off the bench. Olynyk played 14 minutes for Team Canada. He scored 9 points, had 3 assists and a rebound. He did have 3 turnovers. He was also 4 of 5 shooting in this one. Very, very effective. 2 of 3 on 2-pointers, 1 of 1 from the 3-point line. So just a really nice shooting performance from Kelly Olynyk, but he was a game worst -17 in terms of plus minus. He kind of subbed in right at the same time as the U.S. doing a new substitution pattern and just absolutely crushing Canada from that point forward. So some of this is not necessarily on Olynyk, but ultimately at the end of the day, Kelly's not a very good defensive player. He's adequate. He's fine, but he is the biggest player for Team Canada, and they're kind of Zach Edey opting to focus on Summer League and not represent Canada in the Olympics. I understand his decision-making, but they could really use more size in the front court, and not having him was a problem for them. You could tell KO was had to try to guard Joel Embiid. He had to try to guard Anthony Davis. He had to try to guard Bam Adebayo. Those guys all had pretty good games. Embiid fouled out. He only played 12 minutes, but he had 5 points and 6 boards. Anthony Davis was fantastic. He was the best player on the floor in this game. 10 points, 11 rebounds, 4 blocks, 2 steals for him. Bam had 6 points, 7 boards, a pair of turnovers. And Kelly just had a hard time trying to be the primary defender for those guys. That's just not a role that he's ever been particularly good at, and he's just asked to do it significantly for this Canada roster because they don't have a lot of other bigger players that they can sub in instead of him. So he only played 14 minutes. Like we said, they played Dwight Powell a lot in the front court. They have some other front court guys that played at times in this contest, but ultimately Kelly's the best one in that situation at his size, and he's not going to be able to contribute much to this team defensively, unfortunately. Nembhard struggled in this game, 16 minutes, for him, 0 points. He had an assist and a rebound and a steal. He was 0 of 5 from the field. Honestly, he struggled in the sense that the box score doesn't look good, and he missed all the shots that he took. It's hard to have a good game when you miss all the shots that you take, but they weren't bad shots. And Nembhard, he looked fluid as he always does. This is like the biggest thing that Andrew Nembhard is so good at, is just doesn't turn the ball over, doesn't make mistakes, made the right reads, made the right passes, took the right shots. They just didn't go down. And he will get better. He didn't look like he was needing like more time with the team, or like he was unfamiliar with his teammates. Like there was a little bit of that for everybody because they just haven't played together all that much. But I didn't think Andrew looked out of place or disjointed or anything like that. He looked fluid. He looked ready to fill the role that he is brought onto this team to fill as kind of their backup point guard, their third string guard. They're starting Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's, an NBA MVP candidate. They're starting Jamal Murray from the Denver Nuggets, who's a borderline all-star candidate in the NBA. So those two guys are your starting guards. Lou Dort comes off the bench. He's more of a defensive focused guard for this roster. And then you have Nembhard right there. He's kind of the third, fourth guard for this team. Trey Lyles is in the mix. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is in the mix as well. They have some kind of wing hybrid types like RJ Barrett and Dylan Brooks, who aren't really guards, but can kind of slide down if they need them to. But ultimately, Nembhard is the backup point guard for this team, and they're relying on him pretty heavily. And in fact, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had a really nice quote about Andrew Nembhard after the game. Again, Shai, one of the best players in the NBA right now. And he was asked about Nembhard and kind of his presence and what he brings to the team. And I'll just read the direct quote here. I pulled this off the Pacers Twitter account. It says, quote, "It feels like he doesn't make a mistake. He finds guys, picks up full court. He's like the perfect, true point guard." And that really is a great and apt definition of Andrew Nembhard. He is a pass first, pure point guard. He can hit the shots when he needs to. He can go full court. He can defend away from the rim. He can get out in transition. He can make the right reads. He's phenomenal in the pick and roll. He is a true point guard. And I thought about this. Shai has now seen Andrew Nembhard and how he plays and operates and works with him. He's obviously now been teammates with Chet Holmgren for 2 years, has spent a full season seeing him operate. And I wonder if he just wonders, how the heck did this team that had both of these guys not go to the Final Four, not go to the national championship? And Shai, if you do wonder that, so do we. We're all thinking the same thing. That team was absolutely stacked. Neither Chet or Andrew were even the leading scorers on that team. That was, of course, Drew Timme, a multiple-time All-American on the roster along with those guys. That team had so much potential, so tantalizing roster, and it was unfortunate that they fell early in that NCAA tournament to Arkansas. But nice to see Nembhard continuing to get praise for his NBA performance and now his performance with Team Canada. We're going to move on. We're going to continue to talk Olympics, though. Yvonne Ejim, not the only member of her family who will participate in the Olympics this year. We're going to talk about that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you all about today's sponsor, FanDuel. Folks, I love sports. You love sports. We all love sports and never, ever want them to stop. But the playoffs are done for the NBA and the NHL, and we're getting fewer and fewer games. And the sports are just not sportsing like they want them to. Thankfully, it is an Olympic year for us. But FanDuel does let me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus every single day. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. And like we said, it's Olympics time. If you watch that scrimmage and you feel even more confident about Coach Mark Few and Team USA, they currently have minus 470 odds to take home the gold. You can throw some money down there. Or if you thought, hey, you know what? When that Canada roster comes together, they're going to be just fine. You think they're going to medal? You think they could take home the gold, bring it back for Team Canada, for Kelly Olynyk, for Andrew Nembhard? Their odds are at plus 1,100. So head to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, folks, segment 2, still Eddie Patton, still Locked On Zags. I want to remind you all, you can go check out more on college basketball, on the Olympics, on Summer League, on everything coming up on the Locked On College Basketball podcast, hosted by myself, my co-host Isaac Shade of Locked On Tar Heels. Fantastic show. If you have not checked it out, we're talking college hoops 24/7 on that show. Go find it in your feeds or on YouTube. Want to transition to talking about a little bit about the senior women's national team for Canada, as well as the senior men's team. Continue that conversation because Yvonne Ejim, who's about to enter her 5th and final season of eligibility for the Gonzaga Bulldogs for Coach Lisa Fortier's team. Her older brother, Melvin, was one of the 12 players confirmed to represent Team Canada in the Olympic Games. Melvin has been with the team for a while. He's been part of Team Canada's mix for their senior men's national team roster for multiple years, but it was very unclear if he was going to actually get one of those final spots on the roster. They only take 12. They're only playing, but they take more than 12, but they're only playing 12. And Melvin was kind of right on the line of is he going to be one of the last players cut? Is he actually going to make the roster for Team Canada? And it was confirmed before the scrimmage game. Melvin Ejim, 6'6" forward. He played in the scrimmage game 7 minutes. He is going to be on Team Canada's roster. Again, 7 minutes in the scrimmage, mostly came in garbage time, did not score, went 0 of 2 from the field. He did have 5 rebounds in those 7 minutes. So Melvin Ejim, Canada's senior men's national team, Yvonne Ejim, Canada's women's senior national team. Incredible for this family to have 2 Olympians in the same year. And one of the things that really stands out to me is there's a significant age difference between Melvin and Yvonne Ejim. Melvin played college basketball. Again, Yvonne is about to enter her 5th and final year. Last year was her senior year in the 23-24 season. Melvin's senior year in college was exactly a decade before that in the 2013-2014 season. Melvin played 4 years at Iowa State from 2010 to 2014. He was an all Big 12 contributor. He had a phenomenal 4-year career for the Cyclones, finished his career averaging about 12 points and 8 rebounds. His senior season was electric for the Cyclones in 2013-14. He averaged 17.8 points, 8.4 rebounds, 1.8 assists, shot about 35% from the three-point line. Did not lead to him getting drafted in the NBA draft. He spent some time with the San Antonio Spurs in the Summer League. He spent some time the following year with the Orlando Magic in the Summer League. Went down to what was at the time called the D League, is now, of course, called the G League. Played a little bit there, but mostly has spent his professional career playing overseas. He spent a lot of time in Italy, some time in the G League. He spent time in Russia, in Spain, in Montenegro, in Slovenia. He's won a lot of championships. If Melvin Ejim is on your roster, it feels like you're going to win basketball games. He has won championships in multiple different countries. He was the finals MVP for his Italian team back in 2017, and he has been a veteran member of Team Canada. He was on the national team in the 2013 World University Games when he was still in college, much like his younger sister Yvonne, representing Canada before he even got that degree. He was on the national roster for the Pan American Games back in 2015. He was on the FIBA World Qualifier team for Canada in 2016, and he committed to be a part of the senior men's national team back in 2022. Basically said all the pre-Olympic stuff leading up to the Olympics, I want to be a part of it. He signed a contract. He committed to represent Canada at those events. And doing that doesn't mean you're going to make that 12-man roster. But when teams, countries like Canada are evaluating who they want on their roster, and they have 2 to 3 players for 1 or 2 spots, they're going to consider things like how dedicated to this program have you been? And for Melvin, obviously the talent level is good enough, but also he's been a part of Team Canada for a decade. He is an involved member of this community. He is somebody who has represented this country on a national stage multiple times. And so when looking for those final roster spots, it makes sense to give him the cut here. He's not going to be a big-time contributor for them. Like I said, we saw him play 7 minutes in this scrimmage game. Is a 6'6" kind of wing, undersized 4. He doesn't really, they have a lot of players who play similar positions. Dylan Brooks, RJ Barrett are both in that mix. Nikhil Alexander-Walker to an extent is in that mix. Trey Lyles, they just have guys who kind of fill some of those roles. But Melvin's a key piece for this team. He's a veteran. He's a leader. He's somebody who's going to be relied upon to kind of continue to represent Canada basketball on a positive stage, even if he's not a big-time contributor for the roster. And it's incredible to get to do this with his younger sister, 10 years younger than him, Yvonne. She will be on the senior women's national team, not U20s, not anything like that. She is on the straight up Canada Olympic roster. one of the youngest players on the roster, although not the youngest. They have a player, Swyla Swords, who is she's an incoming freshman at the collegiate level. So I think she's going to Michigan. I'm not 100% sure on that. Apologies. But Yvonne is one of the youngest players on the roster. She had a phenomenal season for Gonzaga last year, of course, was the Becky Hammond Mid-Major Player of the Year, one of the most prolific players in all of college basketball. Elite productivity on the front court for Gonzaga, was an outstanding rebounder, a skilled passer, has developed that area of her game. Very excited to see what she can do next year. She's got no Trung twins, no Brenda Maxwell. They're all out the door. Maud Hyben's going to step into a bigger role. They get a transfer from St. Mary's and Tanya Dalton, who's going to step into a starting point guard role for this team. But a lot of new faces around Yvonne, but she's going to be the straw that stirs the drink for Gonzaga's women's basketball team. I don't know how much she's going to play for Team Canada. The extent of what I really know about this roster is that a huge chunk of the players on this roster are in the WNBA or playing professionally overseas. The majority of them are. That probably pushes Yvonne down on the depth chart. In the few scrimmages we've seen, she's played, but she hasn't played a ton of minutes. She's not starting anything like that. When they get into Paris, I wouldn't be surprised if Yvonne isn't playing a bunch of minutes, similar to how I don't think her older brother Melvin is going to play a bunch of minutes, but that's not really what matters. Two members of the same family are representing their country at the Olympics on the senior men's and senior women's team, despite a 10-year age difference. To get to do that the same year at the same time is incredible. What a cool opportunity for this family. What a cool opportunity for Canada, for their basketball program. I'm incredibly excited for this. I'll be tracking how Melvin does while watching how Kelly and Andrew are doing for Team Canada. And of course, I'll be tracking how Yvonne does and how this Canada senior women's team does, because it's going to be really exciting to see this family get this opportunity to each represent their country on the national stage. Yvonne has been with the Canada she's been through the Canada process for a while. She took time off last season. For those of you who remember, she missed a couple games to help them in the qualifying tournament. She helped them win bronze in the 2023 FIBA AmeriCup. She averaged about 8 points, 4.5 boards for them there. So she's somebody they've identified as a future piece for Canada, and not even just a future piece. They already got her on the roster now as one of the youngest players to represent the country heading into Paris this summer. Well, we're going to continue our conversation on the Olympics, talk what's next for Team USA and Canada as they prep for the Olympic Games in Paris. We're also going to talk about when we're going to see Rui for Japan and Filip for Serbia, all that and more coming up in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still talking Olympic Games. Folks, it is July. We are far removed from last season for Gonzaga basketball. We are far away from next season for Gonzaga basketball. I am thrilled that we have Olympic basketball to talk about here on Locked On Zags, because that is the primary thing going on in the Gonzaga space at this point. So we talked about the scrimmage. Mark Few coaching Team USA against Kelly Olynyk and Andrew Nembhard representing Team Canada. USA won. We talked about how Kelly and Andrew did. We talked about the Ejim family, Melvin and Yvonne. Yvonne, of course, about to enter her super senior season at Gonzaga. We talked about her representing Canada on the women's side and her older brother Melvin representing Canada on the men's side. Now I want to talk a little bit about the other Gonzaga Olympians. Specifically, Rui Hachimura, who will represent Japan. Japan is one of the 12 teams set to participate on the men's side, and Filip Petrusev representing Serbia. And then we'll talk a little bit about what's coming up next for Canada and USA. So Japan is scrimmaging Germany on July 19th in Berlin. That is the next event that we have seen on the calendar, at least that I could find on the calendar for Japan. They have had a couple other scrimmage games, but Rui has not participated. He was a pretty late addition to the roster. Japan really wanted Rui. Frankly, they need him. He's the best Japanese basketball player. He's going to put up monster numbers for them. He was hesitant to, I can't confirm this, I should say, but things did not go well last time he represented Japan at the Olympics in Tokyo in 2020. It caused him some mental health issues, and he was one of the last players to join the roster this year. I am speculating that he was maybe weighing whether that was something he wanted to go through again, and ultimately decided that representing his country at the Olympics is more important, and for Japan to qualify is a big deal. I mean, Lithuania and Domantas Sabonis, they did not qualify, but Japan did. And so for Rui to get that opportunity, he's going to put up big numbers. I hope that he, for his sake, I don't expect Japan to medal, although they could sneak into that bronze medal game. But I hope that for Rui, he does well, he stays healthy, and he feels like he represented his country well and doesn't have any spirals from there. That's kind of the main hope for him. But hopefully we'll get a chance to see him play for Japan on July 19th in that scrimmage against Germany. For Petrusev, he's representing Serbia. They were one of the 12 teams that made the Olympics as well. They will scrimmage France on Friday. So maybe as many of you are listening to this on Friday, that is the day of the scrimmage between Serbia and France. I don't expect Petrusev to play a big role because they have a starting center for Serbia. Maybe you've heard of him, Nikola Jokic, back-to-back NBA MVP, NBA champion with the Denver Nuggets. He's going to start the 5. So Filip's going to be his backup most likely. I don't know a ton about the rest of the roster. They have quite a few NBA players on that roster. I think Petrusev is a good player for them, and I think he will contribute, but he's just very much blocked at his own position by one of the best basketball players on planet Earth in Nikola Jokic. But very excited and happy for Petrusev to get this opportunity. His NBA career hasn't quite panned out, may not pan out. We'll see. He spent last year playing in Spain after getting cut from the NBA after just 2 games, but to get the chance to represent his country and play with NBA players is an indication of how good he's been as a professional basketball player, and is just an honor that anybody would want, certainly for Filip as well. Looking ahead to what's going on with the USA team and Mark Few, they are going to scrimmage Australia on July 16th. We will be tuning into that game as well, because Australia, it's really going to feel like Zags versus Gales. I know there's only one Zag for Team USA. There's actually more Zags for Canada, of course, but we're not rooting for Australia. We can't root for Australia. They got 3 St. Mary's players. Patty Mills, who's been a professional basketball player for what feels like forever, he's on he's on Australia. Jock Landale is representing Australia. Matthew Dellavedova, some of the most hated players in St. Mary's basketball history from a Gonzaga perspective, all representing Australia in the Olympics. Look, this is great for St. Mary's. This is great for Australia. This is not a bad thing certainly not for the school or the WCC. It's good that this is happening, but it doesn't mean we have to root for Australia. I'm a little peeved at Australia for cutting Matisse Thybulle, former Washington Husky and Portland Trailblazer right now. I was kind of shocked that they kept Dellavedova over Matisse Thybulle, but hey, I'm not the one making the roster construction decisions over there. But I'm excited to get an opportunity to watch that game, to see how the Australians look, to see how to continue to see how Team USA develops as they kind of get their feet under them, as it were. That scrimmage game on July 16th will be in Abu Dhabi. They're also taking on Serbia on July 18th. So that'll be an opportunity to see Filip Petrusev against Team USA. And for people who are really excited about the Olympics and basketball, and maybe not the Gonzaga side specifically, it'll be a chance to see Nikola Jokic against Team USA. That's going to be very fun. Either way, that should be fun. That game will also be in Abu Dhabi. And then Team Canada, their next scrimmage is July 19th, about 1 week from today. That will be in France against France. Get a chance to see them compete against a very good French national team, a very legitimate contender for a medal, I think. Without digging fully into the rosters, obviously Team USA is the heavy favorite. Canada is in that conversation. I think France is right in that conversation as well. Hard to fully ignore Serbia with Nikola Jokic on the roster and some NBA talent around him. But ultimately, this scrimmage between Canada and France should be a really fun one. I don't envy Kelly Olynyk having to guard Victor Wembanyama. I'm not sure how that's going to go, but that's going to be part of the appeal of watching that scrimmage game, is to see how it goes. That's more than anything why I wish Zach Edey was representing Canada, because Zach Edey versus Victor Wembanyama, sign me up. That would be an absolute blast to watch in an Olympic format. Last thing I want to say on the show here before we get you out of here, it's some sad news to end the show, unfortunately. A longtime WCC assistant coach, just a strong kind of presence in the West Coast basketball community, Mike Scholl, passed away from cancer. We heard about this a couple of days ago. He had just taken a job at Pacific to work with their new coaching staff. That he had been at Long Beach State prior to that. He actually worked with Dan Monson at Long Beach State for an entire decade. He came with him in 2014 when Dan Monson took over at Long Beach State, was there up until this past season when Monson, of course, got fired before they went on the run in the Big West and ended up making the NCAA tournament. So he spent 10 years at Long Beach State under Dan Monson. He had taken this job at Pacific where he was going to work with their new coaching staff. He got diagnosed with cancer and passed away very shortly afterwards. Cancer is horrible. You don't need me to tell you all that. Just to see somebody who was healthy and happy and living his life and still working get diagnosed with cancer and end up losing their life within a very small period of time. It's just tragic. It's really sad. And reading about Mike Scholl was what really struck me to talk about him on the show. He's not a direct Gonzaga connection, like I said. Started this job at Pacific, worked under a former Gonzaga coach for a decade. Prior to being at Long Beach State, he also had a 6-year tenure as an assistant coach at LMU. So he was at LMU from 2008 to 2014, which means I saw him on the sidelines a whole bunch of times during my time as a student at Gonzaga, since that overlapped directly with my 4 years in Spokane. But reading more about Mike Scholl, this was just a tremendous man, a positive light in our world. And that's what makes this so sad. This is a man who he worked in camps. He went overseas. He worked in the Caribbean. He worked in South Africa. He was a very charitable man. He started an AIDS prevention campaign when he was in South Africa. He was part of the Equity and Change Commission at Long Beach State to help make sure that their hiring practices were more diverse. He started a high school basketball league in South Africa. He was an assistant for South Africa men's national team and their U20 team. He did international scouting. He helped identify talent. Like, this is somebody who went overseas and used basketball to make the world a better place. And to see him lose his life for something outside of his control at a young age, I don't know his exact age, but he was not that old, is just sad. I feel for the Long Beach State community. I feel for the LMU community. I feel for the Pacific community who was excited to bring a coach with his acumen, his expertise into their mix, and now no longer get to have him be a part of it. I feel for the South African basketball community who lost somebody who helped build their national team, who helped build their youth leagues. Like, this is just a sad loss for a lot of people. And I wanted to acknowledge that because it is related to Gonzaga in a lot of ways, of course, with the Monson connection and the WCC connection, but also just never want to see a person who has that kind of positive influence on the world, especially for basketball, but even without it, who has that kind of impact, not be able to live as long as they should have is always a tragedy. So my thoughts, my sympathies are out with the Scholl family and everybody involved and who's feeling the loss of his life, because it is a real tragedy. Well, we're gonna end the show there. It's always not a comfortable way to end the podcast. We are going to end it there. We're going to be back on Friday. Friday's show, we're talking starting lineup for Gonzaga. 4 of the 5 spots are taken. Who's going to take that final spot? We'll make an argument for Ben Gregg. We'll make an argument for Caleb Battle. We'll make an argument for Steele Venters and Dusty Stromer. All that coming up on Friday's episode. Next week, we'll get into some of the NCAA tournament changes that we're hearing about, resumes, how they're looking at evaluating teams for Selection Sunday, all that good stuff coming your way next week. All right here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Have a fantastic rest of your week and weekend. And until next time, as always, go Zags.